Welcome, my friends, and let me share with you a story that begins with a simple act of kindness but grows into a tale of unexpected reunions, deep betrayals, and the enduring power of love. In this story, you'll discover how the smallest gestures can ripple through time, touching lives in ways no one could have foreseen. So sit back and enjoy this journey of grace, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family.
Amelia Brown adjusted her wide-brimmed hat as she stepped out onto the porch of her small farmhouse. The early morning sun cast a warm glow over the fields, where the wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze. The air was thick with the sweet scent of clover, a sure sign that the bees were hard at work. At 62, Amelia had seen many seasons come and go, but each one felt a little harder than the last. Her body ached more these days, and the years of labor had etched deep lines into her once smooth skin. Yet, despite the hardships, she remained resilient, holding on to the farm that had been in her family for generations. The farm, however, was a shadow of its former self. The fields that once burst with crops had grown over with weeds, and the barn roof sagged precariously. Her husband, Henry, had been the backbone of the operation, but after his sudden heart attack 5 years ago, things had never been the same. The bills had piled up, and the repairs had been put off. Now, the only source of income was the honey from her bees, which she sold at the roadside stand at the edge of her property. Amelia sighed deeply as she loaded the last crate of honey jars into her old pickup truck. The honey was good, some of the best in the county, but with the rise of big stores and online shopping, fewer people were stopping by her stand. She knew she had to make a good sale today if she was going to afford the materials to fix the roof before the fall rains came. The drive to her usual spot was short, the road winding through the rolling hills and past the small town where she had lived her entire life. When she arrived, Amelia was dismayed to see that most of the prime spots near the road had already been taken by other vendors. She found a space near the back, under the shade of an old oak tree, and began setting up her table. As the morning passed, Amelia watched as car after car stopped at the stands closer to the road. The other younger and more energetic vendors called out to the passers-by, waving their brightly colored signs and offering samples. Amelia's table, with its simple wooden sign and modest jars of honey, was easy to overlook. By noon, she had sold only a few jars. She counted the money in her tin box, her heart sinking as she realized it was nowhere near enough. The roof would have to wait again. Just as she was about to pack up, she noticed a small, rusted car pull over to the side of the road. A young girl, no more than 12 years old, stepped out, clutching a small backpack. Her clothes were worn, and her hair hung in tangled strands around her face. Amelia watched as the girl walked over to the bus stop across the street and sat down on the bench. Something about the girl's slumped shoulders and the way she buried her face in her hands tugged at Amelia's heart. She hesitated for a moment, then grabbed a jar of honey and a small loaf of bread she had brought for her lunch and walked over to the girl. "Are you hungry, sweetie?" Amelia asked gently, holding out the bread and honey. The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying for a long time. She hesitated, but then her stomach growled loudly, and she reached out to take the food with a mumbled, "Thank you, madam." Amelia sat down beside her on the bench. "What's your name, dear?" The girl sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve. "It's Emily. Emily Turner. I'm trying to get to my grandma's house, but the bus driver said I don't have enough money for the ticket." Amelia's heart ached as she listened to Emily's story. Her parents had been fighting more and more lately, and the night before the arguments had gotten so bad that Emily had run away. She had hoped to find refuge with her grandmother, but now, stranded at the bus stop with no money, she didn't know what to do. Amelia thought about the little money she had made that day. It wasn't much, but the thought of leaving Emily alone by the roadside filled her with dread. Without hesitation, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the few bills she had earned. "Here, Emily," she said softly, pressing the money into the girl's hand. "This should be enough to get you to your grandma's house. You take care now, and make sure you tell her everything, okay?" Emily looked at the money, her eyes wide with surprise. "But madam, I can't take this. What about you?" Amelia smiled gently. "I'll be just fine. You need to get home safely. That's what matters." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she hugged Amelia tightly. "Thank you, madam. I'll never forget this." As the next bus arrived, Emily waved one last time before getting on, her face bright with hope. Amelia watched the bus pull away, a small smile on her lips. She prayed silently that Emily would find the comfort she needed with her grandmother. Little did she know how much that small act of kindness would come back to her in ways she could never have imagined. Several years passed, and Amelia's life continued much the same. The farm struggled and her health began to decline. The roof was never fully repaired, and the leaks became a constant source of worry. But Amelia kept on, tending her bees and selling honey when she could. The small town was changing, with more people moving to the city, leaving fewer customers for her goods. One particularly harsh winter, Amelia found herself snowed in for nearly a week. The roads were impassable and she was cut off from the rest of the town. Her food supplies dwindled, and she rationed what little she had, but by the fourth day she realized she would have to do something or risk starving. She bundled up in her warmest coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and set out on foot toward town. The snow was deep, and each step was a struggle, but she pressed on, determined to make it to the general store. As she trudged along the deserted road, a car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a worried expression. "Madam, you shouldn't be out here in this weather. Can I give you a ride?" he asked. Amelia hesitated for a moment, but the man's genuine concern won her over. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking from the cold. Once inside the warm car, the man introduced himself as Tom Spencer. He was new to the area, having recently bought a small house on the outskirts of town. He had been on his way to check on his elderly mother when he saw Amelia struggling through the snow. "I couldn't just leave you out there," Tom said as he drove slowly down the icy road. "Where were you headed?" "To the general store," Amelia replied. "I've been snowed in for days, and I'm running low on food." Tom nodded. "Well, you're in luck. I've got plenty of supplies at my place. Why don't you come with me, and I'll fix you up a care package?" Amelia was taken aback by the offer. "That's very kind of you, but I don't want to impose." "It's no trouble at all," Tom insisted. "Besides, I could use the company. It gets lonely out there in the snow." Amelia couldn't argue with that. She agreed, and soon they were pulling into Tom's driveway. His house was small but well kept, with smoke curling from the chimney and lights glowing warmly in the windows. Inside, Tom made Amelia a cup of hot tea and set about gathering supplies from his pantry. As they chatted, Amelia learned that Tom had moved to the area to be closer to his mother, who was in a nursing home in town. He was a widower, and like Amelia, he had experienced his share of loss and hardship. "I've learned that it's the little things that keep us going," Tom said as he handed Amelia a basket filled with canned goods, bread, and even a few jars of homemade preserves. Small acts of kindness, like helping out a neighbor in need, can make all the difference. Amelia smiled warmly. "I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Tom. You've done more for me today than you know." With the supplies safely in her basket, Amelia felt a renewed sense of hope. The kindness of a stranger had lifted her spirits, and she knew she would be okay, even in the harshest of winters. As spring arrived, Amelia found herself thinking often of Tom. They had struck up an unlikely friendship, with Tom visiting the farm regularly to help with repairs and chores that Amelia could no longer manage on her own. His presence brought a sense of comfort and companionship that Amelia had sorely missed since Henry's passing. One afternoon, as they were sitting on the porch enjoying the warm sunshine, Tom turned to Amelia with a serious expression. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he began. Amelia looked at him curiously. "What is it, Tom?" Tom hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I've been doing some research into the land around here, and I found out something troubling. The land your farm is on, it's part of a larger parcel that was sold to a developer a few years back. They've been quietly buying up property, and they have plans to build a big resort and golf course." Amelia felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "What does that mean for me?" Tom's expression softened with sympathy. "It means they'll likely try to buy you out, and if you refuse, they could take legal action. Eminent domain, it's called. They'll claim it's for the public good." Amelia's heart raced as she absorbed the news. The thought of losing her farm, the land that had been in her family for generations, was unbearable. "But this is my home," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't lose it." Tom reached out and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know, Amelia. That's why I'm telling you now. We need to prepare. There may be legal ways to fight this, and I'll do everything I can to help. In the days that followed, Amelia and Tom worked tirelessly to gather information, contact lawyers, and rally support from the community. But the developers were powerful, and their influence reached deep into the town's government. Despite their best efforts, it seemed like the odds were stacked against them. Then, just when things looked their bleakest, Amelia received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from a law firm in the city, offering their services free of charge to help her fight the developers. The letter was signed by Emily Turner. Amelia's hands shook as she read the letter. Could it be the same Emily she had helped all those years ago? She remembered the young girl's tear-streaked face and the way she had hugged her so tightly before getting on that bus. It seemed impossible, but the name was the same. That evening, Amelia called the number on the letter, her heart pounding with anticipation. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello, this is Emily Turner. How can I help you?" "Emily? It's Amelia Brown," Amelia said, her voice quivering with emotion. There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a joyful exclamation. "Mrs. Brown, I can't believe it's you. I've thought about you so many times over the years. How are you?" Amelia could hardly believe her ears. "I'm doing okay, dear, but it's been a rough few years. I can't tell you how glad I am to hear from you. That letter, are you really offering to help me?" "Of course, Mrs. Brown," Emily replied warmly. "You helped me when I had nothing, and I've never forgotten it. Sissif, now it's my turn to help you." Over the next few months, Emily threw herself into the case, using every resource at her disposal to fight the developers. She uncovered shady business deals, corrupt officials, and illegal land grabs that had been kept hidden for years. Her tenacity and skill in the courtroom earned her a reputation as a fierce advocate for the underdog. And soon the tide began to turn in Amelia's favor. But as the case progressed, a darker side of the battle began to emerge. Threatening letters were sent to Amelia's home, warning her to drop the case or face dire consequences. At first, Amelia tried to dismiss them as empty threats, but when her barn was set on fire one night, she knew they were serious. Tom was the first to arrive at the scene, having seen the flames from his house down the road. Together, they managed to put out the fire before it spread to the rest of the farm, but the barn was a total loss. The police were called, but there was little they could do without evidence of who was responsible. As Amelia stood in the charred remains of the barn, tears streaming down her face, Tom wrapped her in a comforting embrace. "We'll get through this, Amelia. You're not alone." Emily arrived the next day, her face pale with concern. "Mrs. Brown, I'm so sorry this has happened, but we can't give up. That's exactly what they want. We have to stay strong." Amelia nodded, though fear gnawed at her insides. "I'm scared, Emily. They've already taken so much. What if they come after you or Tom next?" Emily's eyes hardened with resolve. "Let them try. I'm not backing down, and neither should you. We're going to win this, Mrs. Brown. I promise." Despite the escalating threats, Emily continued to press forward with the case. She worked late into the night, poring over documents, interviewing witnesses, and building a case that would bring the developers to their knees. The trial became a media sensation, with reporters flocking to the small town to cover the David and Goliath battle. Amelia's story captured the hearts of people across the country, and donations poured in to help rebuild the barn and cover legal expenses. As the trial drew to a close, it became clear that Emily had built an airtight case. The developers were exposed for their illegal practices, and the town council members who had been complicit were forced to resign. The judge ruled in Amelia's favor, not only protecting her farm, but also ordering the developers to pay damages for the fire and other harassment. Amelia couldn't believe it. After so many years of struggle and fear, the nightmare was finally over. As she stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and well-wishers, she spotted Emily and Tom standing off to the side, smiling proudly. With tears of gratitude in her eyes, Amelia made her way over to them. She pulled Emily into a tight embrace, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Emily. You saved my farm. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Emily smiled warmly. "You already did, Mrs. Brown. You gave me a second chance at life when I needed it most. This was the least I could do." Tom joined in the hug, and the three of them stood there, united by the bond of friendship and the power of kindness. In the months that followed, Amelia's life slowly returned to normal, though she knew it would never be quite the same. The farm had been saved, but the scars of the battle remained. The barn was rebuilt, but it took time for Amelia to feel safe again. Tom continued to be a constant presence in her life, helping with the farm and offering his unwavering support. Their friendship deepened, and soon it became something more. They spent their days working side by side and their evenings sitting on the porch talking about the future. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom turned to Amelia with a serious expression. "Amelia, there's something I need to ask you." Amelia looked at him curiously. "What is it, Tom?" Tom took a deep breath, his eyes filled with warmth. "I've been thinking a lot about us and how much you mean to me. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time, and I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, but as she looked into Tom's eyes, she knew her answer. "Yes, Tom, I'll marry you." Tom's face broke into a wide grin as he pulled her into a tight embrace. "You've made me the happiest man in the world, Amelia." Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, held on the farm under the shade of the old oak tree. Emily was there, standing by Amelia's side as her maid of honor, a role she had gladly accepted. As Amelia and Tom exchanged vows, the love between them was palpable. They had both been through so much, and now they were finally getting the chance to start anew. After the ceremony, as they celebrated with friends and family, Amelia couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had faced loss, hardship, and betrayal, but through it all, she had remained strong. And in the end, it was the small acts of kindness, like the one she had shown to a young girl all those years ago, that had brought her to this moment. As the sun set on her wedding day, casting a golden glow over the farm, Amelia knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Surrounded by love, with Tom and Emily by her side, she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a future bright with hope, Amelia Brown began the next chapter of her life. She had once been the giver of kindness, and now she had received it back tenfold. The love she shared with Tom and Emily was a testament to the power of compassion, a reminder that even the smallest acts can change the course of our lives in ways we could never imagine. And so the story of Amelia Brown, a story of love, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family, came full circle. A story that began with a simple act of kindness had grown into something much more, a story of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of the human spirit.